Good evening and welcome to the Bhakti Center in Zagreb, hosted by Sundarananda. And glad to be back here. Yesterday we had a conversation on the Bhagavad Gita, and today we're speaking on the Srimad Bhagavatam, the magnum opus from Srila Prabhupada, who came to the West to spread this knowledge, and he was translating this canto actually while he was still residing in the holy place of Vrindavan, and then brought this with him in a suitcase. That was his real wealth when he came to the West. So sharing from the treasure box of this very important first work he was working on in the English language. And it says actually about the Bhagavatam that even though it may be imperfectly composed in another language in that sense, because Sanskrit is a perfect language, so even by translating it into English, it's already bad. And my spiritual teacher, he was once telling us that this is a kind of like a prophecy of the Bhagavatam itself, that one day someone will come who will render this in an imperfect language, but still the pious people will listen to it and will get benefited and will get enlightenment. So even though I may not be the perfect speaker, because who's perfect? That's Krishna, you know. But I will do my best to present it the way I learned it from my teacher and my lineage, and also through my personal life and practice. So this is a section where the king of the earth, back then, in more civilized times, there's just one ruler of our planet. And this was still very civilized back then. Of course, there are many kings, many jurisdictions, but they all recognized one sovereign ruler. And his name was King Parikshit. And this is the famous King Parikshit, who's listening to the Srimad Bhagavatam actually for 7 days in a row without drinking. So it's a dry fast also. And I was just with rapt attention listening to it, because he was cursed to die in 7 days. So he had the fortune, or misfortune you can say, he knew exactly how much more he has life to live. So if you would know we have this 27 years and 3 months and 7 days and 3 hours, we would be like, all right, that's the time I got to make, to really become happy, fulfilled, realize God, and all the things. And that's one thing I realized when I do these sessions with people, reading them into past lives, the moment of their death. Most of the time people used to say like, I wish I had more time to devote myself to God. I missed the main lesson in life, to look for God, This is really what's coming down to. And there was this research also from Vaishnavas, devotees, the spiritual people. They were asked at the end of their lives, what do they regret the most? And it was a few things. They hadn't read enough, and they didn't spend enough time with their friends. So it's like, because friends are like-minded, we feel happy, we share things that are very near and dear to us, and many times we're so distracted that we're not doing the things we really love to do, like absorbing ourselves in this kind of like uplifting literature, arts, with friends and family. Instead we're just working, doing all kind of nonsense, taking care of our taxes or whatever, So this is a section of the 16th chapter, where also it's entitled it's about Kali Maharaj, who is the ruler of the earth actually nowadays. There's also still only one king. His name is Kali Maharaj. And he's the real ruler. All the other rulers are just his disciples, his minions, slaves essentially. And they are the ones in power right now. So Kali Maharaj is the king of the earth right now, in case some don't know, but he's the king. And back then, the emperor of the world was still ruling, and Kali was just starting. It was 5,000 years ago, the Yugas, and 5,000 years ago this dark age came, and that is synonymous with hypocrisy and quarrel. So that's what's happening, that's what we know of, that's how we grew up, right? We see people lying in our faces, and so on. Politicians or other people. And many things could be said about the dark age. People are short-lived, lazy, misguided, above all, always disturbed. That sums it up pretty well, and that's the Bhagavatam saying like that. And in this time, we will see very clearly that that's what's happening right now. So the emperor back then, he wasn't sitting somewhere in his palace, hiding from the public, just enjoying life, and he was on the forefront of things. So he took charge. So that's a real leader who's at the forefront, not hiding somewhere. he would go with his troops into battle, not hiding somewhere. Right? I think Prabhupada many times used to say like that. You know? They were
leading the troops. He was leading the troops.
Yes, leading the troops, exactly. By his example, right? And he was the bravest of all warriors, not the coward behind, you know? So Maharaj Parikshit sat on a chariot drawn by black horses. His flag was marked with the sign of a lion. Being so decorated and surrounded by charioteers, cavalry, elephants, and infantry soldiers, he left the capital to conquer in all directions. So that was his duty. Maharaj Parikshit is distinguished from his grandfather Arjuna, the famous Arjuna from the Gita, right? For black horses pulled his chariot instead of white horses. He marked his flag with the mark of a lion, and his grandfather marked his with the mark of Hanumanji, the famous devotee of Ram. A royal procession like that of Maharaj Parikshit, surrounded by well-decorated chariots, cavalry, elephants, infantry, and band, not only is pleasing to the eyes, but it's also a sign of a civilization that is aesthetic, even on the fighting front. Not this humongous steel, things, and yeah. So now we're using not a book, but another device, so it takes time for the next verse. I mean, it's interesting, right, that it was really conquering all directions personally. So it's not that sovereignty is just done because you're the sovereign monarch somewhere sitting. People have to really accept your authority. And that means you need to conquer so that they will subdue themselves and accept you. And they give you homage. Like now, for example, the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II, was passing away not long ago. So all the world leaders, because she was Mary, the Queen of the world, I don't know, because all the leaders came to pay her homage, right? Who would have thought she's more like a ceremonial, sentimental figure of the past? But all the world leaders came, all of them came, all the leaders, and leaders we don't even know of, to discuss what's happening next. You know? So what kind of leader in the world passed away and then everybody came to their funeral? It's a long time ago this happened. Like, can any one of you remember a leader that passed away and all the people came to her funeral or his funeral? Any president? Any leader?
Marshal Tito.
Yeah, Tito. In this region, Tito.
Actually, he had more leaders on his funeral than Queen Elizabeth.
Oh yeah? So
Yeah.
Tito from this region. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a while ago, no? But it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
The dynamic. And now it's like, okay, who's going to be the new world leaders, world order, all the things, right? It's really a time of transition in many ways. And it's also nice how the aesthetics are mentioned. So civilization has different aspects of culture, and aesthetic is one of them. So if a knight in shining armor would go out there, it's way different than being in this kind of like modern warfare in the trenches, in the mud, and just kind of, you don't even see the enemy you kill most of the time because it's not a close combat. And it's kind of really like people are just in their trenches and shooting from miles away, some missiles, and killing innocent people. It's not even a real battlefield anymore. And they were just meeting on the battlefield and doing it together, and they showed some skill and prowess, And here they just sort of like, hide and seek and just battling each other from the distance, like cowards actually in some way, right? Not to say that these soldiers are not brave people risking their lives for their masters, but I'm sure most of them would prefer not to, in a way, especially if they don't really know what they're fighting for, Most people on both sides probably, they're like, what are we really doing here, But anyway, that's the unfortunate situation of this day and age we're living in, So Maharaj Parikshit then conquered all parts of the earthly planet. Bhadrashva, Ketumala, Bharata, which is nowadays India, the northern Kuru, Kimpurusha, which is actually, technically speaking, the lands where the half-beast, half-humans live. We still know it from our mythologies, so there were regions of the earth back then where the Kimpurushas apparently still lived. And somehow, in the Vedic culture, the earth mandala is more like an island, and you have like large mountains surrounding those, and there are a couple of sort of like regions we don't even know anymore, can't even travel to anymore, which back then was still available. And some of these regions are actually outside of what we call nowadays Earth, but they're still part of the Earth mandala, but we can't travel there anymore. You know, it's restricted. It's a restricted zone. And there are forbidden areas in the world where nobody's allowed to go, like Antarctica and other places. And so there are many speculations about it, but we know from the ancient scriptures that there are different islands and places, continents, we don't know anymore actually. And he exacted tributes from their respective rulers. So that's how, you know, it was clear who was really ruling. They had their jurisdictions, the local governors, kings, but they were giving to the world government, so to speak, also tribute. No? And it can be many things, of course. So here's described, Bhadrashva is a tract of land near Meru Parvat, and it extends from Gandhamadana Parvat to the saltwater ocean. There's a description of this Varsha in the Mahabharata. The description was narrated by Sanjay the Dhritarashtra. Sanjay, the famous speaker of the Gita, was telling it to the blind king, you know, the seer. He had this vision, he was a seer, who could see things from far away. Maharaj Yudhishthira also conquered this Varsha, and thus the province was included within the jurisdiction of his empire. Maharaj Yudhishthira, one of the 5 Pandavas, so one of the relatives of Parikshit. Brother of Arjuna, his grandfather, so his great-grand-uncle, his great-uncle. Maharaj Parikshit was formally declared to be the emperor of all lands ruled by his grandfather, but still he had to establish his supremacy while he was out of his capital to exact tributes from such states. So in some way, King Charles III, right, he is now the new king, but in some way he's not the same like Queen Elizabeth II, because he now needs to conquer the world in a way that people will also respect him as a king, because he's just kind of like a 73-year-old new king, and everybody speaks about actually Prince William, who's this kind of big, you know, he was in the army, and he's more like you would imagine a king in a way. And here you have the elder, who may be a good guide or advisor, but in the Vedic culture, people in this age would already be retired, would live in a forest, in a cave, somewhere in a monastery, praying, or maybe advising the young people. And Prince William is more the age of a king, really, who would take the reign on. You know, and King Charles would have a hard time to convince the world that he's the king now after Queen Elizabeth. So he has a quite challenging task to do, to conquer the world in all directions. No? And the British Empire is not longer really there, so which army even? No? And now the Commonwealth is breaking apart, sort of like people say, and also all these former colonies, they're looking at Queen Elizabeth's, what is it? Crown. You stole this diamond from our people 300 years ago. We want it back, you know? We want this back. We want this back. They would have never dared to say this while she was still there, right? She was never. Nobody said to Queen Elizabeth when she wore this crown, "This is our diamond from India. Give us back." Or the Africans, "You stole this from us. Give us back." Nobody dared. But now that she's no longer there, they just kind of like, give us back to us. You stole it from us. Why not before? So it's now a new king, and he still has to establish his supremacy. Right? Good luck, you know. But you can only wish everyone well. But he has a very difficult task, and now people want their jewels back, you know, and many other things, you know. And also they are starting to become more self-conscious about their own past, because the Europeans conquering all directions back then, they were always saying, like in Zimbabwe, it means actually something like the Great Walled City. When they saw this, they, oh, some foreigners must have built the city. You African people, you can't build this, you know. But they built it actually. But the Europeans, they thought, oh, these are just wild people living in the jungle. They have no culture. But they're very civilized all over the world. But the Europeans were blinded, right? They couldn't recognize the knowledge they saw. And they destroyed so much in the wake. But that's history now. But history is changing now again, right? Things are like, the dice are again like put there. So it's interesting what will be the destiny of this world now. And the South rising up and hopefully will regain more of its sovereignty. Ketumala. This earth planet is divided into 7 dvipas by 7 oceans. And the central Dvipa, called Jambudvip, is divided into 9 varshas, or parts, by 8 huge mountains. Bharatvarsh is one of the above-mentioned 9 varshas. And Ketumala is also described as one of the above varshas. It is said that in Ketumala Varsha, women are the most beautiful. This Varsha was conquered by Arjuna also. A description of this part of the whole world is available in the Mahabharata, the great epic of India. It is said that this part of the world is situated on the western side of Meru Parvat, and inhabitants of this province used to live up to 10,000 years. Human beings living in this part of the globe are of golden color, and the women resemble the angels of heaven. The inhabitants are free from all kinds of diseases and grief. So have you visited this continent? Have you met these golden people who live 10,000 years? No? Somewhere on earth this place is there, right? This was 5,000 years ago. Right? So somehow or another we lost another continent, not only Atlantis. Right? And they are the most beautiful women there. So yeah, they knew something, no? Bharatvarsh. This part of the world is also one of the 9 varshas of Jambudvip. A description of Bharatvarsh is given in the Mahabharata. And Bharatvarsh is known as India, actually. Present-day India. And the center of Jambudvip is Ilavritavarsh. And the south of Ilavritavarsh is Harivarsh. The description of these varshas is also given in the Mahabharata. It is mentioned here that the women in both these varshas are beautiful, and some of them are equal to the apsaras, or heavenly women. It's interesting, right? How when you have to describe a certain country, they're starting with how the women look like there. And it's sometimes like I told one partner of mine, a friend, that I'm here in Croatia, and oh yeah, where all the beautiful women live, So still it's happening, like they're like defining a place like based on the beauty of the women in a way, even back then,
What about the men? Who cares?
Uttarakuru. According to Vedic geography, at the northernmost portion of Jambudvip is called Uttarakuru Varsh. It is surrounded by the saltwater ocean from 3 sides and divided by Shringavan mountain from the Hiranmaya Varsh. Then it's northern part, maybe Russia, all these places. No? Kimpurusha Varsh. It is stated that it's stated to be situated north of the great Himalaya mountain. Okay, here we go. Which is 80,000 miles in length. 80,000 miles in length. Yeah. The Earth is 45,000 miles. So it's a different, much bigger what we know now. Like I mentioned, right? So this is really talking about the whole Earth and not just a tiny quarantine section we're in right now, apparently. This part of the world were also conquered by Arjuna. The Kimpurushas are descendants of the daughter of Daksha. The Kimpurushas are again the half animal, half human beings. And Daksha had a goat head also. And Daksha is one of the great progenitors, created a lot of descendants, made a lot of children. When Maharaj Yudhishthira performed a horse sacrifice, yajna, the inhabitants of these countries were also present to take part in the festival, and they paid tributes to the emperor. This part of the world is called Kimpurusha Varsh, or sometimes the Himalayan provinces. It is said that Sukadeva Goswami was born in these Himalayan provinces, and that he came to Bharatvarsha after crossing the Himalayan countries. In other words, Maharaj Parikshit conquered all the world. He conquered all the continents, adjoining all the seas and oceans in all directions, namely the eastern, western, northern and southern parts of the world. One may wonder, because conquering the world apparently seems to be a thing, and how this is being done. Nowadays maybe it's different than it used to be. Like we can see when Kali conquered the world, that his vices always followed. So wherever he went to conquer, those vices came. Alcoholism and prostitution, the prostitution of womanhood, and gambling, right? All these things, and also slaughtering the animals. So wherever Kali conquered, this followed in his wake. That's how you can recognize the influence, if this place is ruled by Kali or not. And because King Parikshit was such a strong leader, all of these things were not really present. So he had no place to go. So later on, then he was asking him, where shall I go, and so on. And then he said, okay, go also where the gold is, where the money is. So you follow the money, you're also there where Kali is. So wherever the king visited, he continuously heard the glories of his great forefathers, who were all devotees of the Lord, and also of the glorious acts of Lord Krishna. He also heard how he himself had been protected by the Lord from the powerful heat of the weapon of Ashvatthama. People also mentioned the great affection between the descendants of Rishi and Pritha, due to the latter's great devotion to Lord Keshava. The king, being very pleased with the singers of such glories, opened his eyes in great satisfaction. Out of magnanimity, he was pleased to award them very valuable necklaces and clothing. Purport. Kings and great personalities of the state are presented with welcome addresses. This is a system from time immemorial, and Maharaj Parikshit, since he was one of the well-known emperors of the world, was also presented with addresses of welcome in all parts of the world as he visited those places. The subject matter of those welcome addresses was Krishna. Krishna means Krishna and his eternal devotees, as the king means the king and his confidential associates. So Krishna is never alone, he's always with his tribe, so to speak, his village. Krishna is a village boy, so he always has everyone with him. And it's interesting actually that even though he went with an army to conquer the world, there was apparently no fighting, no bloodshed. Wherever he came, people addressed him, welcomed him with praise. So he didn't conquer the world with a sword, actually. He conquered the world with his sheer presence and his character, and everybody loved him. So that's real conquering, through love, not through force. Force is artificial, force is for the weak, in a way. But someone like him, who could have easily conquered everyone with his mighty bow and army, he didn't need it even to. But still, he had to follow the royal etiquette, and come with all his entourage. Traveling party, so to speak, But he didn't need it to fight to conquer the world, It's very interesting. He just had to be present somehow and be himself in that sense, right? And people loved him. If you come somewhere and the people praise you and they sing glories about your forefathers, they didn't sing glories about actually his deeds so much, but his lineage. And you can see that real royalty will be groomed with character that befits their position. So they're not upstarts, in other words, who were created by artificial propaganda of the media and then got enough votes for that reason. But they're coming from backgrounds that are actually they're not so qualified really. But somehow artificially they're put in this position. And then people are surprised that they fail miserably because they don't have the character. They are prone to fall victim to the vices of life. They have not been trained like an emperor to be strong in mind and sense control like a yogi, to be like a saintly king. They are still into gambling and business people, into money and all kind of nonsense, basically speaking. And then such kind of people are not fit to rule actually. So that's our unfortunate situation, that the rulers we know as rulers are not as qualified as kings used to be when they come from a lineage of great devotees, of great saintly people in such family. Maybe, people from family traditions that are very pious, very learned and cultured, and the children will also be like that most of the time. Or when they're, it can be like that, Maybe some families who are like that. They still exist, fortunately. And hopefully these families give their children these books to read. That will be talented.
Just a short comment, which is very inspiring for me. I remember from Mahabharata when Pandavas had to leave last year of exile incognito. They took shelter in the kingdom of King Virat, who was their friend, but they were under discovered. They were not, and Yudhishthira presented himself as a friend of King Yudhishthira who used to play with him dice or something. But it's this description when they walked through the streets of the capital. The people were astonished with their appearance, beauty, then also this athletic posture. And then he appeared in the palace. King Virat immediately said, "O tiger amongst the people, you rule with my kingdom."
Oh.
That was the appearance of them, how they looked, how they behaved, and also character and everything, which is very integral part of this. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
How they didn't need weapon to rule. They just, people were immediately, full of worship and submission and everything, because they had trust immediately in them.
Yeah. That's a good point also, that people would trust someone like that. So the leaders have to be trusted. And now we have leaders, nobody trusts them actually. That's why you have all these watchdogs, NGOs watching them, and all these scandals with tax evasion. They're exactly the opposite, but yeah, they were who they were. Even though in disguise, they could still be seen for their character and their prowess in a way. That's a beautiful point. So it says here, Krishna and his unalloyed devotees cannot be separated. And therefore glorifying the devotee means glorifying the Lord, and vice versa. It even says that Krishna prefers when his devotees are glorified and not so much himself. So in that sense, his forefathers were glorified. It was more pleasing to Parikshit than if he would be themselves, if he would be personally praised. No? Even though they also praised him that Krishna protected him in the womb. And that was kind of like an atomic weapon based on mantra technology. And he was safe from that. That was his fame in a way. And then he saw Krishna, and from that time on he was always looking for him. Once he saw him, he was always looking for him. That's, I think, what his name means also. Krishna and his unalloyed devotees cannot be separated. Maharaj Parikshit would not have been glad to hear about the glories of his forefathers, like Maharaj Yudhishthira and Arjuna, had they not been connected with the acts of Lord Krishna. The Lord descends specifically to deliver his devotees. Parichanaya sadhanam, the sadhus, the holy people. The devotees are glorified by the presence of the Lord, because they cannot live for a moment without the presence of the Lord and his different energies. And the great sage Narada Muni, he's saying that actually the symptom, his definition of bhakti is that one feels extreme distress when one is separated from Krishna. And one offers every act to Krishna. That's his own definition of bhakti. The Lord is present for the devotee by his acts and glories, and therefore Maharaj Parikshit felt the presence of the Lord when he was glorified by his acts, especially when he was saved by the Lord in the womb of his mother. The devotees of the Lord are never in danger, but in the material world, which is full of dangers at every step, the devotees are apparently placed into dangerous positions. And when they are saved by the Lord is glorified. It's such an interesting point, because many people say sometimes, why do bad things happen to good people? Why was Jesus crucified and countless other people killed? Or saved? We don't know. Sometimes people got saved, or we don't even know about that, right? And again, this is really to glorify the devotees and God, really. That's the right perspective to it, not the mundane platform. We tend to judge things from the mundane platform. But it's important to look at the perspective of Krishna and things. He protects the soul more than the body, because the body anyway dies at some point. So that's very important to consider. But Krishna would not have been glorified as the speaker of the Bhagavad Gita had his devotees like the Pandavas not been entangled in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. All such acts of the Lord were mentioned in the addresses of welcome, and Maharaj Parikshit, in full satisfaction, rewarded those who presented such addresses. The difference between the presentation of welcome addresses today and in those days is that formerly the welcome addresses were presented to a person like Maharaj Parikshit. The welcome addresses were full of facts and figures, and those who presented such addresses were sufficiently rewarded. Whereas in the present days, the welcome addresses are presented not always with factual statements, but to please the post holder, and often they are full of flattering lies. And rarely are those who present such welcome addresses rewarded by the poor receiver. It's a culture of appreciation, really. You know? Not someone would just give and give and not get something back. Like nowadays, so many artists are so poor and suffer. They're so important, everybody values them so much and wants to listen to their music for free, and they have no money, and it's very difficult for them to survive, even though everybody of us loves music, and we take benefit on YouTube and whatnot. But how many of us donate to these artists, even though we can listen to their music for free, right? Or similar things like that, you know? Especially the conscious artists who are not playing the game of Kali, who are not singing about drugs and sex all the time and violence, or music producers, and movie producers. They don't make big money when they do conscious, beautiful films, right? Because it's not about sex, drugs, and violence all the time. So they don't make the big bucks, you know, because Kali doesn't reward godly creations, obviously, you know. He only rewards when his four vices are glorified, right? Not Krishna and his devotees. If you were a journalist in the 60s, 70s, you could make a big career writing bad about Hare Krishna movement, you know. You write big articles, got big money from the editors, you know, writing lies about, you know, Prabhupada, even other people like that, you know, and many others like that. They got defamed and they get big reward. It's like always Kali Yuga, the symptom is that what is irreligion will be presented as religion, what is real religion will be presented as irreligion. And it's always kind of like the opposite is more true. So if you see something from the Kali media, so to speak, if you do the opposite thinking technique, you know more what's the truth actually. And that's how they reveal the truth indirectly. And if one knows the art, you know, then one can see more what they're actually up to. Right? It's kind of obvious, but one has to be trained to know this art a little bit, based on this principle of understanding how Kali Yuga works, you know, and how successful people in this Kali Yuga became successful also sometimes. Maharaj Parikshit heard that out of his cross's mercy, Lord Krishna, who is universally obeyed, rendered all kinds of service to the malleable sons of Pandu by accepting posts ranging from chariot driver to president to messenger, friend, night watchman, etc., according to the will of the Pandavas, obeying them like a servant and offering obeisances like one younger in years. When he heard this, Maharaj Parikshit became overwhelmed with devotion to the lotus feet of the Lord. The purport. Lord Krishna is everything to the unalloyed devotees like the Pandavas. The Lord was for them the Supreme Lord, the spiritual master, the worshipful deity, the guide, the chariot driver, the friend, the servant, the messenger, and everything they could conceive of. And thus the Lord also reciprocated the feelings of Pandavas. Maharaj Parikshit, as a pure devotee of the Lord, could appreciate the Lord's transcendental reciprocation of the feelings of his devotees, and thus he himself also was overwhelmed with the dealings of the Lord. Simply by appreciating the dealings of the Lord with his pure devotees, one can attain salvation. This is very powerful, isn't it? Who doesn't want to attain salvation? And just by appreciating the devotees of the Lord. So the opposite of blaspheming, criticizing, finding faults is appreciating. Even though one may be not perfect, right? Who's perfect anyway? But one sees, someone chants the holy names, someone gives prasadam, someone just helps this child. You know, one can always see people do something good. And this is how Krishna sees it actually. Krishna only sees the good we do. He doesn't consider the bad we're doing. Right? That's the beauty. This is the supreme character of Krishna. And his devotees resemble Krishna also. Right? And that's why the more we become godlike, the more we resemble Krishna in this kind of attitudes too. It's just natural. And it's beautiful when you think about it, that the Supreme Lord the spiritual master, the worshipful deity, right? That he was all of this for them, but also the servant, the watchman, right? He would do anything and everything for his devotees. He's not feeling like, I'm the big Lord, why shall I serve my devotees? They have to serve me, kind of. That's more like the attitude of a Kali king, in a way. Because now someone like Parikshit Maharaj, he did this whole ruling the world as a service to the people. Not because he wanted to be praised and wanted to have all the riches and all that. That wasn't his motivation. He was sincerely serving the people. So we call it public servants in theory. But how many public servants we really have who are not even available to speak to the public properly? Back then people could go to the king and address the problems right away, and his duty was to take care of it. Now try to go to your minister and talk to him about the problems, about child raising, rising wages, or rising mortgages, and so many problems are there. But they rather do the opposite. Instead of helping, they raise the taxes. That's all they can do. Raise the taxes every year. Inflation, all the things, right? It says like it's an ocean of faults. So one can unlimitedly talk about the ocean of faults. We won't do this now. But just to illustrate the difference between a real ruler who would serve his people, and the best example is Krishna himself. He's exemplary in a way. God himself accepts a teacher. He's the sweetest of all, and he would do everything for his devotees. And we should also be everything and do everything for the devotees, following Krishna's example. So the Lord reciprocated the feelings of the Pandavas. And this is what he says in the Gita: the way one reciprocates, I will respond accordingly. But he even gives way more. I mentioned that yesterday. He's so generous. He's really overpowering us with his love. That's the quality of God. Truly it is. Maharaj Parikshit, as a pure devotee of the Lord, could appreciate the Lord's transcendental reciprocation of the feelings of devotees, and thus he himself also was overwhelmed with the dealings of the Lord. So the overwhelm, it's the ecstasy, basically speaking. Simply by appreciating the dealings of the Lord with his pure devotees, one can attain salvation. So it's so critical to really have this point deep in the heart, sink in the heart. The Lord's dealings with his devotees appear to be ordinary human dealings, but one who knows them in truth becomes at once eligible to go back home, back to Godhead. The Pandavas were so malleable to the will of the Lord that they could sacrifice any amount of energy for the service of the Lord, and with such unalloyed determination, they could secure the Lord's mercy in any shape they desired. So this notion is there that we can conquer God through our love. And then God even does all these things for us. But that's not the motivation of a devotee, obviously, because they were so resolute and determined to do everything for the Lord, and naturally he will reciprocate like that. It's just natural. There's no question of entitlement or exploiting each other. That's out of the question. It's pure devotion. And it means it's unmotivated and uninterrupted. And it's as per Krishna's desire also. These are the definitions a bit of pure devotion as per our acharyas, our great teachers. Now something happens here. Now you may hear from me of what happened while Maharaj Parikshit was passing his days hearing of the good occupations of his forefathers and being absorbed in thought of them. There's no purport to that. But it's interesting that really primarily it was about his forefathers, listening to the devotee, not his own praise. He wasn't interested in that. And being absorbed in the great deeds of his forefathers, let's say like for us it would be the deeds of Srila Prabhupada and his masters, for example, or the great saints we can remember. So to be absorbed in the dealings of the great saints of this world. We know his stories, like the Buddhists would talk about Buddha and his disciples, and the Christians would talk about Jesus and his disciples and remember them, right? And the Muslims would do the same with Muhammad and his disciples. And on it goes. And to be absorbed in the narrations of these great personalities, which gives great pleasure and also sort of enlightenment. It actually leads to salvation. So it's I think, education. I remember from my own childhood that the best, I really love to listen about Jesus actually. I loved to listen about his life. I had a wonderful religion teacher, and he just talked about his life. No theology, this and that. Just talked about his life. And I just loved it so much. Just listen to the life of Jesus, what he was doing and all that. Maybe some of you were also like listening to this when you were a child, and maybe you remember how beautiful it was to listen about someone like Jesus, you know. Or when you're Buddhist, to listen about someone like Buddha. Or if you're Hindu, you listen about someone like Krishna and the Parikshit, you know. But it's always the same, like they were full of love, full of service, full of sacrifice. They were the opposite of selfish. They were always giving themselves to others, you know. And that was inspiring. And then we can aspire to live like that and to follow in their footsteps and be uplifted like that, you know. And then something happened here. The personality of religious principles, Dharma, was wandering about in the form of a bull. And he met the personality of earth in the form of a cow, who appeared to grieve like a mother who had lost her child. She had tears in her eyes, and the beauty of her body was lost. Thus Dharma questioned the earth as follows. The bull is the emblem of the moral principle, and the cow is the representative of the earth. When the bull and the cow are in a joyful mood, it is to be understood that the people of the world are also in a joyful mood. The reason is that the bull helps production of grains in the agricultural field, and the cow delivers milk, the miracle of aggregate food values. The human society, therefore, maintains these two important animals very carefully, so that they can wander everywhere in cheerfulness. But at the present moment, in this age of Kali, both the bull and the cow are now being slaughtered and eaten up at foodstuff by a class of men who do not know the Brahminical culture. The bull and the cow can be protected for the good of all human society simply by the spreading of Brahminical culture as the topmost perfection of all cultural affairs. By advancement of such culture, the morale of society is properly maintained, and so peace and prosperity are also attained without extraneous effort. When Brahminical culture deteriorates, the cow and bull are mistreated, and the resultant actions are prominent by the following symptoms. So this would be subject to the next, but here are so many good points that it would just take some time to go a little bit into that. And the theme was also a bit before how important culture is, and here it's very much highlighted, the Brahminical culture, and that means a culture which is primarily centered on spiritual values, knowing the difference between matter and spirit, that everything in life is a combination of matter and spirit. And nowadays, our knowledge culture has forgotten that. And we learn in school also that we're this kind of biochemical robots, essentially. There's no soul, God is dead, this type of... And to what kind of results does this lead? When you just spoke briefly about Jesus, he said, like, on the results you will recognize who they really are. And what kind of peace and prosperity we see nowadays, all over the world. We see famines and disease and all kind of catastrophes of earthquakes. Now Florida is flooded. Sometimes too much rain, like now. Sometimes too little rain, like in the summer. Crops, food crises. So it's, again, an ocean of fault. No need to dwell too much into it. But the fundamental principle, and everybody tries to solve these problems. I've been so many times in conferences of world leaders in the United Nations and other places, and you have the greatest minds of the world coming together to speak about all the problems. They're really good in churning the ocean of faults. And then you have this feeling of despair a little bit, which is also needed to raise funds to solve the problems, with their need for their research, to find out how to solve the problems. And it's very difficult, and they find solutions that create more problems. And we had an energy crisis, we had atomic energy. Now we have hundreds of billions and trillions of costs to take care of the nuclear waste. This is so costly to take care of nuclear waste, that you have entire mafia structures who just take care of it, put it on a truck, make a little hole, drive it in there, dig it up, problem solved. But now Italy is contaminated so much, by nuclear waste. It's a big problem in Italy, because So the solution to all these problems is not so complicated, really. is spreading the Brahminical culture and to protect the bull and the cow. So no more steak. And when we go into environmental conferences, many of the environmentalists, they are vegetarians and even vegans. Because they know that animals take so much water, they produce so much methane, they destroy so much forests in Argentina, for example, for us to have nice steaks on the plate over here. And it's also not easy to digest, right? Red meat is not so, leads to disease. It's not so healthy, actually. Other meat is better. There's recommendation like chicken or goat, but red meat is really not good for our health. I mean, there's a lot of science about it nowadays. And even if the cow is dead, they say if you put her on the ground, deep, after you took the leather away for making drums or shoes or whatever, it will fertilize a whole acre perfectly. So even in her death, she will serve the people by fertilizing an entire acre, just putting her deep in the ground. The entire acre will be taken care of. And villagers have to pay so much mortgages to buy for a tractor, and they have to maintain it. In some places in the world, there's so much sand dust, the tractors are not working long anyway. And then they create a lot of debt, they need to get a lot of petrol, just to plow their fields, which previously was just done with the bull easily. And now they have to have all these artificial things that don't last long, and then they have mortgages and they make suicide because they can't pay it. In India, many farmers commit suicide. They don't have their proper seeds anymore. The seeds they get from the corrupted agricultural companies, they don't produce new seeds. They always have to buy new ones. So they're always depending. They always try to create dependencies. And they zap the energy away of the people until they literally commit suicide. So Brahminical culture promotes living in harmony with nature. And you can see in the history of the world, big civilizations, empires, and then they find ruins at some point. Everybody forgotten about them. Some local villagers know, there's some ruins there, and they excavate them. And the scientists look at their dynamics, and they see how it grows out of proportion. The forests are gone. Then they see disease and sign of decay, and then there's collapse. And then people live tribal again, and they lost their language, they lost a lot of knowledge. There are many tribes who didn't lose all the knowledge, and they're meeting to exchange with each other, so that lost knowledge can be restored together. Everybody had puzzle pieces, so to speak. Well, that's an interesting dynamic as well. But this Brahminical culture will be primarily a spiritual culture, knowing the knowledge of Brahman, of the spiritual nature of everything, of spirit and matter, and also of proper conduct in terms of your occupation, duty, who you are. Everybody was really in this whole, how can I, like coaches, so like how can I fulfill my purpose? How can I be the best version of myself? So this is a culture who promoted that actually. Know yourself was the Greek proverb. Know yourself. And based on knowing yourself, you would do what you love to do. I think you mentioned that.
Yes.
Right? And even Warren Buffett recently mentioned that, somehow like in some lecture he gave. And it's very wise. He said, do what you love. Maybe with people you love. It's even better. But you do what you love because it's natural for you. It's effortless. Like you're into IT. So you program, you like the change, we talked about it, right? And you like that. But also you love to grow your own food. And you love to see plants grow, right? It's not a contradiction. You still keep on doing what you love. And this is good for you, right? That was very beautiful how you shared that. And Brahminical culture will promote the talents and gifts of each person, that they can be of service, of the greatest service to their community, their family, and the whole planet eventually, right? And nowadays the education system just creates workforce every year, like a factory, moved onto the market. Here we have more workforce in jobs nobody likes to do, things nobody likes to do, right? If we're unfortunate, then we're working in some place, in an office somewhere, sitting in front of a computer in a way, not doing what you love. I mean, you even said so you became a runner because your back started hurting, right? So in ancient times, people were running a lot. They didn't have this back pain like that, right? Because of posture and sitting like being on the computer. So many work for some kind of boss they hate, and they get bullied like in school. You go from one school to the next, in the work environment, people are backbiting, talking, it's not very nice, And with strangers, and people move to other cities, like in the US, every couple of years, people move like 1,000 miles over there, 3,000 miles over there. And when you meet people from the States and they ask you, like, where do you grow up? They tell you a 10-minute, 15 minutes journey for all the cities, back and forth, where they lived. Every couple of years moving somewhere else, even as children, and later on with their work life. So uprooted, they don't know anybody. Maybe some of you grew up in an area here where you know people since your childhood. Maybe you still meet them and know them. They don't know them anymore because they already moved to 15 other places meanwhile. And always like meeting new friends, everything goes very quick. Then you go to another place, you forgot your old ones, get a new batch, This is the future of this world. Srila Prabhupada used to say that when you want to see Kali Yuga advancing, the future, you need to have a look at the United States. So gang violence, people living homeless with their families on the street in 10 cities, completely, I have like one spray to release. I have some I used to have, now I've got it kind of healed, like an asthmatic condition, and I have this pump. And someone in a festival, his stuff got stolen. He said, oh, this cost me $1,000. And I was like, what? This cost here like $40. And the pharma industry over there charges them $1,000. They're so over-exploitating them, because they lost this kind of culture. And now there's a movement in the States to gain back that culture also, from the central government and others, whole movement, And all over the world it's sort of more and more coming. The eco-village movement. There's a whole notion which is called poverty alleviation, how to uplift people from poverty. Because here it says the result of such a culture is peace and prosperity. Everybody nowadays longs for peace and prosperity. Because Krishna says, without peace there's no happiness. Without happiness there's no peace. So we all want to live peaceful and happy and prosperous. Abundant, right? That's the kind of beautiful word. Everybody look at have an abundant mind frame. So you can attract wealth into your life. But abundant mind frame doesn't come from just thinking positive. It comes from understanding who we really are, that we are soul, that we're eternal, that there's the supreme eternal, our well-wisher. And the peace formula is that we know that everything belongs to God. We come naked, go naked. Meanwhile, we claim this is mine, and I can fight, I can take this away from you to have more for myself, for my so-called enjoyment. This only leads to suffering, either this life or the next. And people have forgotten there's a next life. And when they're doing these past life regressions, it's a fact. I mean, people go to a next life doing nonsense. They have a long journey ahead of themselves to be rectified. It's always a school of love. If your teacher, if you do something naughty from your parents or your teacher, they will give you some rectification out of love, ideally, to correct. It's similar like this. The universe is a whole place like that in a way. It rewards good deeds, and it, rectifies bad deeds. But ultimately, we need to get out of this whole good and bad anyway, and become like really transcendental about it, and become pure love, because the soul is not bound to be in a heavenly body or in a hellish body. These are still material bodies, and still conditioned, right? And this is a real art, how to navigate ourselves beyond that, so that someone like Jesus or Prabhupada would love both angels and demons, and both joined the movement, And one disciple of his, he was telling me they had this kind of like people who were more like angels devotees and more demon devotees. And there were these two camps. And then you had the normal humans, so to speak, It's interesting. And Prabhupada was loving all of them, right? And everybody served Krishna somehow. They were turning the milk ocean together. There's this ancient story, So many good things came out of it. And based on and also maybe because this is such a demon world, maybe in some demon societies, devotees have to be also more like coming from this background to handle it, Like if you used to distribute books in the 80s, people used to beat you up on the street. So you got to be a kind of a tough person to kind of, be brave enough. Maybe you could defend, Or they went like behind the Iron Curtain, where they could have easily been killed by the secret police anytime, right? And they need to be real tough and rough people to preach to tough and rough people, in a way. And here it says again, by advancement of such culture, the morale of society is properly maintained. So it's all about ethics and morale. And that's so critical, because this leads to peace and prosperity. So it's very important that we all understand that for our own lives and as a collective society, that we create the leaders we deserve also. We can't just blame the politicians, because they are the product of the collective. We are very empowered that way to have those leaders we deserve. So if we are more ethical and moral, then we have such leaders also. But most of the people, they're not like that. So that's a bit of a quagmire in a way, So that's why it says the greatest beneficial activity in society is not to distribute food to everyone or to give everybody clean drinking water. This is very important and it's very rare, and it will become more of a problem in the centuries to come. To give shelter, medicine, food. Actually in Vedic culture, I was learning from an acharya of the Sri Sampradaya, from the Lakshmi goddess. Now it's Navaratri, the time of the divine goddess, Parvati. In South India, he told me in the Vedic culture, those things were free. Food, medicine, education, it's for free. Nobody had to pay for them. So now people talk about universal basic income and all that. In a way, like if food, education and medicine is given for free, shelter also in a way, nobody had to struggle with rent. This is the new concept, then people are all of a sudden much more empowered to really contribute to society instead of struggling so much just for the basic necessities, so that people are kind of controlled and they can't really become sovereign, empowered individuals and collective societies. So all of these are keys for peace and prosperity, and hopefully in this time of unrest and poverty and turmoil, people may appreciate Brahminical culture again and the keys that have given to us by our acharyas and teachers and prophets, so that we can take it more serious, because when everything is fine and good, there's no need for that apparently. But the results come quickly, because in the mode of passion, you work very hard, you get quick results. So the results we can see nowadays. The promises of modernity were false, in a way. The promises of technology, that everything will become easier, no, it's not. Nowadays, depression is so high. We need to have a portal over there as an escape room for people to go in front of a computer to play computer games to escape the nonsense out there, right?
Here is a real escape room.
Yeah, yes. It's a safe haven. It is a safe haven. It is like that.
We should take a sign.
Yeah.
Here is an escape. Here is an escape.
Yeah.
So take escape. On wall, Big arrow. Here is an escape.
Yeah. So let us enter the real portal to move into this culture. And culture is so beautiful in a way. It's so many things, right? It's fashion, it's food, it's music, it's entertainment, it's etiquette, it's ethics, values. This is how we can conquer the world. This is what Srila Prabhupada used to say, that Krishna consciousness will conquer the world through culture, not through the force of battles with, And also, as we see with Bhagavad Maharaj, through his persona. So if we can imbibe this culture ourselves, each one of us can conquer our own domains in our own ways, wherever we are, Every devotee. Yes, spiritual warriors, exactly.
Circle of influence.
Yes, a circle of influence. Yes. Yeah. There's a circle of concern and circle of influence. And our circle of concern might be very big, our circle of influence, whatever, but the circle of influence can grow also. Like it says, like a devotee may have a certain circle of influence based on a karma initially, like the bull on the nose who's moved around for the wheat production, right? And when we become connected to Krishna, the Almighty, this range can be increased tremendously. So there's a lot of empowerment, and to move beyond just our own purpose, to move to our highest soul destiny. So it's good to do what we love to do, but even there's more to that, what our soul really loves to do. And that's our highest calling, and that leads to that, of course. And using all our gifts and talents, and whatever way we can do to live it ourselves, in our family, in our community, in our wider community of life. And so, you have some, would you like to share some more? Do you think we still may have some time, or is it?
No, usually we start at 8.
Yeah.
You can give tomorrow class also if you like.
On the Bhagavatam also continue?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still here some days. I'm very happy to do that service, and it's inspiring for me to go deep myself. It's always different than just reading it or speaking about it. The speaker gets benefited. I feel I get benefited speaking about it. That's what it says, right?
Yeah.
The speaker has benefited, and I hope that
speaker here and those who are by chance around, everyone becomes.
Yeah. And it's such a challenge if you think about it, how to conquer the world through Brahminical culture. You know? Because if we don't, then this world will be the opposite of peace and prosperity. So if we have children and children's children, it's our duty to conquer the world, actually. Each in our own way.
We can say also, we can benefit the world.
Yes. And yes, it's for the ultimate benefit. It's not selfish. Actually, it's the opposite, because in some way, one has to go out of the comfort zone. Like Srila Prabhupada leaving beautiful heavenly place like Vrindavan, going all the way to the west in difficult circumstances, and then traveling all the day, night. He slept a few hours only, right? But he loved doing what he was doing. And like Jesus was saying, give to the emperor what is the emperor's, so we still pay our taxes. Still Kali will be in charge in some ways, and also his minions, they have their territories, they're sitting in their capital, in their palaces, and they get their taxes. This is not our concern. They keep on doing what they're doing. It's not our business. But for us to be engaged, to spread the Brahminical culture, which is also for the benefit of the ruling elites as well, because they also want to live peacefully and prosperous, and not be like the Sri Lankan president who had to flee because his citizens were, putting his palace to flames, and he had to flee. Who wants that? Even as a ruler, you don't want that, So it's in the interest of everybody, really. So it's a win-win for all, Yes, exactly. So with this, may peace prevail on earth. It's a beautiful prayer. Hare Krishna, Yom Tat Sat. Thank you.
Oh, wait, yeah. Is there some question?